Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Well, starting off good. First hour, Steve Ray here with us. He's just back from a pilgrimage and getting ready to go on another pilgrimage. Do you know that I can say that every time he's on? Except for a brief period during COVID, probably, I could always say, Steve's just back from a pilgrimage and he's getting ready to go on a pilgrimage. And if I had to guess where he's going on pilgrimage next, I don't know why I think I would say the Holy Land. And I do know why, because that's where he goes there a lot. But I could be wrong on that. Steve Ray, of course, Catholic convert. CatholicConvert.com is his website. A longtime defender of the Catholic faith, author of many wonderful books, including beautiful reflections on the book of Genesis and the Gospel of St. John. Steve Ray, thanks for being here with us.
You're welcome, Cy. I love coming on and doing these shows with you.
Am I correct that the next place you will be going is the Holy Land?
Yes, in fact, we're supposed to leave in 2 days with Ave Maria University, and we're still waiting to make sure everything clears. But yes, we are planning to go, and that's a sold-out trip. But we are going with seats still available in April. We just got back in December from the Holy Land with 53 people. It was beautiful. You know, it was nice, Cy. No lines. No crowds.
How beautiful.
We own the country. We were the first big American bus back, and we were the talk of the town in Israel. And but we got another trip going with a few seats left only in April if anyone wants to go with us. Best time to go.
Now, can you still go over to Bethlehem or Nazareth?
Oh, yeah.
No problem.
We went everywhere we went everywhere we went before. The only thing is it was so much easier because
there's nobody
no
around.
Other buses. No.
All right.
No.
Check out CatholicConvert.com. Today we're going to talk about one of your, I think this is one of your favorite topics. We've talked about indirectly about this we've talked about Mary and what her life is really like in Nazareth with you before. But today we'll talk about the Holy Family. So first of all, if you've got questions about the Holy Family, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And Steve, I think you came up with a really great way to think about this. Let's take a look at a day in the life of the Holy Family.
Yes, and one of the reasons I thought this would be a good topic for us today is because every month the church has a special devotion every different month. And for the month of February, it is the Holy Family and the boyhood of Jesus. Now, next month is St. Joseph, and every month has its own special devotion. But the one we're in now is the Holy Family and the boyhood of Jesus. And so I thought that's a good one. Now, I have to say, Cy, that being on your show talking about this is not my favorite place to talk about the day in the life of the Holy Family.
I bet it's not. I'm sure I know where your favorite place is.
I like talking to you about it with everybody, but I've given a talk 100 times at the house of the Holy Family in Nazareth, right in front of the Church of St. Joseph with a cave underneath where they lived. And I do a talk there with our groups every time, over 100 times now, a day in the life of the Holy Family. And so it's fun because I can point and I can say right there, and
how beautiful.
Makes it a lot more real.
Yeah. It's I think you've said before, it's like the fifth gospel that you can really, all right, but you'll have to do theater of the mind with us then to point to
I do.
I will put us in the position. But let me ask you this. You see a lot of images of the Holy Family, and I'm talking about physical images like paintings, sculptures. What do you think in general of the image we have of the Holy Family?
Oh, boy, this is a complicated issue, and I don't want to make enemies with people. I understand why people make paintings like they do. Joseph is usually very effeminate. Mary is almost like she's from Sweden, and she's right out of the beauty parlor. And Jesus is almost feminine looking in a lot of pictures with blonde hair and blue eyes. And Joseph has lotion soft hands holding a lily. And I frankly don't appreciate this kind of images of the Holy Family because that's not what they look like in the real world. And I think it does them a disservice. However, I understand why art does that, because art is not just to show exactly what the eye sees. Art always tries to bring out the inner meaning, the deeper meaning, the persona of a person. Mary's the Immaculate Conception. Joseph is a righteous man. Jesus is the Son of God. And so they try to, if I'm going to paint my wife, and just the beauty I see in her. She's probably going to be perfectly painted, not like she looks like every day.
Yeah.
And that's not, and it's not wrong, because I'm showing the love I have for my wife. I have light shining off of her face. I have her blonde hair glistening in the sun, and she doesn't
Yeah.
look like that all the time, So,
Right.
but I understand why art is trying to express the inner qualities, but that's not what they would have looked like if you saw them. For example, you see Mary dressed in blue. Mary would not have been wearing blue. Blue and crimson and purple were very, very expensive dyes that came from seashells in the sea. And usually only royalty, kings and queens, had the money and the ability to dress in purple or blue or red. The average people, their clothes are very drab, made of linen and wool. They didn't have the money to dye them, and they didn't have the clothing stores or big malls where you can go shopping for clothes. They had very simple handmade clothes from fabrics that were common. So Mary would not have been walking around in blue, beautiful blue clothing. And you often see them with a Bible in their hand or reading. Nobody had Bibles back then. There was no books. And even a synagogue was lucky to have a Torah scroll that you rolled because of the cost. There was no paper. There was no printing. It was made of animal skins. You had to write on it by hand. Nobody could afford that. So when you see, I had a picture of Mary with her mother at one time, just for fun. And I put it on my blog, and I said, find the errors in this picture. And we came up with about 7 or 8 of them. Mary had blonde hair. They were holding a prayer book in their hands. She was wearing blue. And it was just... And so the images that we get of the Holy Family, if you think of it, they lived in a cave. They lived rustic. There was no running water. Mary had to walk 15 minutes to get water in a jug every day to have water for the family. There were no showers, toothbrush, dentists, none of these things. And even today, Sai, if you go out of the big cities into the desert areas with the Bedouin, none of them have all their teeth. And they don't have dentists back in those days. So to even think that the apostles had all their teeth is we're thinking in our own time and extrapolating it back into what it was like back then. This is in The Chosen. We were just with Jonathan Rumi on the Good News cruise with Corporate Travel, and he was on the ship with us. And all those guys in the movie The Chosen, their teeth are all perfect. That would not have been the case. So my point is that I understand why art presents Joseph holding a lily in his hand. It represents purity, and so on. But in real life, you would not have recognized these people probably.
I hadn't thought about that, but just the aesthetics of it, it's just a totally different culture than we have now. I mean, we're completely different than we were, say, 100 years ago. So you got to imagine 2,000 years ago, quite different.
And even people shaving, for example. There's no electric shavers. How do you shave back then? They didn't have stainless steel blades. Even you did circumcisions with flint knives. A flint knife, a stone.
You just made me really nervous. I know, I heard what you said. It just made me really nervous when you said it.
I know. When I give talks at men's conferences and I explain what life was like in circumcision, all these guys start crossing their legs and going, "Oh, can we change the topic?"
Yeah. Steve Ray's here. If you want to talk about the Holy Family, Steve's been to the Holy Land just scores and scores and scores of times. We'll be going again soon in April. You can find out all about his travels and how you can travel with him at CatholicConvert.com. But we're going to go through a day in the life of the Holy Family with Steve Ray. We'll continue that right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I think everybody kind of takes for granted, you know, if you're a doctor, a nurse, or you're a family, a mother and father who encourage your child to have an abortion. You see, you're aiding in a great crime.
Mother Angelica Live Classics. Tonight, 8 Eastern on EWTN Television and Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Steve Ray, our guest. Your call's welcome. There's 2 lines open right now. So we'll get to everybody who calls. If a couple more calls come in, 888-318-7884. All right, Steve's going to walk us through a day in the life of the Holy Family. And as Steve said, he's been to Nazareth many, many, many times. And well, we'll talk about the size of it, but because I'm amazed every time you talk about the size of Nazareth. But tell me about their morning. What do they do? They get up. What do they got to do?
Okay. The size of it, by the way, is probably 2 acres. And that's not a big village. Maybe no more than 200 or 300 people living there in a very close. No major street going through the town. No grocery stores, no shopping centers, no gas stations, nothing like that at all. Well, when you wake up in the morning, and it's very rustic, there's no plumbing or anything. So I always ask people when I'm there with them, what do you think the Holy Family did the first thing in the morning when their alarm clock went off? Oops, I don't mean alarm clock. I mean the rooster next door. The people wake up. Well, what did the Holy Family, what did they do the first thing when they woke up? Everybody says, pray. And I said, is that the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up? And they go, well, no, we go to the bathroom. Well, right. So did the Holy Family. And we have this mentality that they walk 3 feet off the ground. They're really not like us.
Yeah.
They're somehow holy. Being holy and sinless makes them also angels or floating 3 feet off the ground. But they did first thing in the morning have to go use the bathroom. And when you're in a cave and you don't have plumbing, where do you go to the bathroom? And this is all of a sudden people then start saying, you can't talk about the Holy Family like that. And I said, yes, I can, because I've been to Nazareth and I've walked in those fields and I've walked in that and I've used my imagination what it would have been like. And they lived a very rustic life. And it's better to understand them, who they were and what it was like in their time, than to live in this fantasy world that they lived like us. They don't. Right. It's called anachronism, when you take your experience and you extrapolate it back to them and assume that they lived like you, because everybody's always lived like we do in America, right? So the first thing, and then they would pray, and they would pray together before Joseph and Jesus went off to work. But they didn't have prayer books like we do. They didn't pull out their Magnificat or their prayer book or their Bibles, because they didn't have those. And they learned to memorize these things. That's why even in the Mass, when we do the Psalms and we recite them, so, people in the early times, think how you would listen to the readings at Mass. If you did not own a Bible and you couldn't even read, how would you listen to them? You would listen to them as though this may be the only time I'll ever hear these words in my lifetime.
Oh, yes, right.
And you're going to listen very carefully, and you're going to try to remember. And those people, I think probably their minds work quicker than ours, because we become lazy with computers and books and writing and all this. They had to use their minds more to remember these things than we do. So they would pray, but they would chant. And the Jews had the same kind of a ritual during the day of readings and psalms that they would pray together and chant together. And then they'd have breakfast, and it was a very simple kind of breakfast, because they didn't have money for expensive food, and they didn't have grocery stores. They just they would eat smoked fish. They would get those. A peddler would come through from Capernaum and Magdala, where they had the smoked fish, and they would get those smoked fish. And Mary would make bread, but they didn't have money for wheat, because wheat was for rich people. And what they would eat would be barley, which was for the poor people. Remember the little poor boy, when they needed loaves to feed everyone? The boy brought the barley loaves, their barley. That was for animals and for poor people. And we know the Holy Family was not rich because when they took Jesus to the presentation at 40 days old, they needed a lamb, but they couldn't afford a lamb, so they took 2 turtle doves, which are cheap. The little kids would snare them and trap them. You know, it says you buy 2 sparrows for a penny. Well, why would anybody want to buy sparrows for a penny? Because they would eat them. It's called the poultry of the poor. And kids, maybe Jesus and his friends, would snare and trap sparrows and pigeons and sell them for sacrifices or to flavor their lentil stew or something. So they would eat very simple foods. They would have nuts, and they would have pomegranates and dates and lots of olives and olive oil. Maybe on occasion have some eggs, because they did have chickens. Remember, Jesus said, "As how often would I, as a mother hen, have?" So they would have that. But they would eat lentils and simple grains. Probably a much healthier diet than we eat.
It does.
And
I was thinking that as you were saying it. It sounds healthier.
Yeah. Yep. So they would eat and do these, and then there were very simple things that they did, and then Jesus and Joseph would leave to go to work, and they were what we call carpenters in English, but it's tekton in Greek. Tekton means, simple definition, one who works with hard materials, wood, stone, or metal. Another way to say it is, they were the kind of guys that if you said, "Show me your hands," you would see calluses and scars on their hands from working with hard materials and rocks. And there is not a lot of wood in Nazareth, but they use a lot of stone. It's called Jerusalem limestone. And even the last time in December when we were driving around Nazareth, I pointed out to everybody, see, there's still the quarry. They do it with hydraulics and trucks now. But back in the old days, they still built these cities out of this limestone, and they would quarry it by hand with chisels and hammers. And I think that that's what Jesus and Joseph did, because there's a city called Cyprus. It's about an hour away.
Nope, we'll get a little technical problem with Steve. All right, well, Steve Ray's our guest, and that technical problem will work its way out. Sorry, Steve, we had a little technical problem. You just cut out for a minute, but go ahead, continue what you were saying. Go ahead. Okay, well, Jesus and Joseph probably went to Sepphoris to work. It's an hour walk away, and they were building a huge Roman city there during the lifetime of Christ. And so they were bringing people, skilled and unskilled labor from all over the area to work and to build that city. Many people, and I agree, think that Joseph and Jesus went over the hill, walked that hour down to Sepphoris, and that's where they worked with the guys in Nazareth. They'd walk through. That's where they made an income. There was money to be made. When you're a carpenter or working with your hands, you need somewhere to work. Yeah. So when I take people to Sepphoris, I said any one of these stones here could have been placed there, could have been shaped with hammers and chisels, chink, 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 all day, 12 hours a day, shaping them into squares, cubes, and setting them in the walls and in the theater seats. And any one of those stones could have been put there by Jesus and Joseph, because that's where it seems that they were working. So they would work all day. They didn't have OSHA requirements for safety helmets and eye protection and ear protection. They were just out there, rough, tough guys. And in Nazareth, it can get to be 100 degrees in the summer. And I've been there when it rained 4 inches in a day, 4 or 5 inches in a day. So, then I asked myself, Si, what did they talk about when they were walking to work? Did Jesus and Joseph stay together? Did they walk with the rest of the guys? Did Joseph teach Jesus, or did Jesus teach Joseph? And when you saw Jesus, you saw Joseph, because I bet you, Si, you have characteristics and mannerisms of your father. Right. Things that he did, with his hands or sayings. My dad, even my grandkids still do things with their hands like Grandpa did. They even do it funny sometimes. I think that when you saw Jesus, you saw Joseph, because Joseph would have taught Jesus everything he knows. He would have taught him. I think Joseph taught Jesus some of the parables. And when you strain out a camel and you strain out a gnat and swallow a camel, I think Joseph's the one that told Jesus that first. And that does sound like something your dad would tell you.
It would. And as 8-year-old, Jesus would have said, ha ha, that's pretty funny, Dad. Swallow a camel. And so I wonder who taught Jesus how to pray? In other words, who taught the Word of God to read the Word of God? Who taught God to pray to God? So this is Joseph's job. So as they're walking, I think they're talking to each other. They don't have televisions. They don't have earbuds in their ears. They're walking and talking. Joseph's job, his responsibility was to educate his son. Why is Jesus a builder? Because his father's a builder. Why was Paul a tent maker? Because his father was a tent maker. And the rabbis taught, if you do not teach your son a trade, you teach him to be a thief. Because he doesn't have a way to make a living.
Right.
So this is Joseph and Jesus walking to work and doing that. Now, Mary, she's at home. What does she do all day? Well, she goes and gets the water in the morning after they leave, and she goes and gets the water again in the evening before they get home. She makes their clothing. She weaves the clothing. She goes out and barters for nuts and grains and whatever she needs for the family to eat. You want to see what a woman did back then? Read Proverbs 31, which is the proverb of a faithful wife. Probably gives you a good idea of Mary being very industrious in doing these things. And during the first years of her life, she changed Jesus's dirty diapers.
Yeah, it's so healthy, I think, for us to remember that I particularly love, of all that you just said, the fact that if you saw Jesus, you'd have seen Joseph, because that's just how it is. If you become human, if that's God's choice is to become one of us, that's how we are. We imitate one another and we become like one another.
Yep. And he's genetically Mary's son, so he looked like his mother. He acted like Mary and looked like Mary.
Let's see if we can get you a question before we go to the break, and then we'll come back and do more of a day in the life of the Holy Family. Steve Ray here to do a day in the life of the Holy Family with us. Prentice is in Gonzales, Louisiana, watching on YouTube. Prentice, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Steve. No? Hi, Prentice.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yep, you're on the air with Steve Ray. Go ahead.
Hello? Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
Good.
I wanted to ask about the brothers of Jesus. So I think my understanding was that these were half-brothers from Joseph's side, or maybe that these brothers were actually children from a different married to a different, like Clopas or some. I'm trying to see where's like the scriptural evidence and backup to those claims that those aren't actually Jesus, Mary and Joseph children.
Very good question, Prentice, and that we could do a whole show on, but I'm going to try to distill this down very quickly. The church has always taught that Mary did not have any other sons, that Joseph and Mary did not have sexual relations. Mary did not have any children. In fact, when they referred to Jesus, they say Jesus, who is the son of Mary, or Mary, the mother of Jesus. It doesn't say Mary, the mother of Jesus, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Now, we do hear it say that the brothers of our Lord, but the brothers can mean a lot of things in that context, because a brother can mean someone from the same mother, but it can also mean a stepbrother from a father who doesn't come from that mother. It can also, in that culture, refer to cousins. I know families who father and mother live on the first floor. Son number one gets married. They build a second level. Son number two gets married. They build a third level. All of those cousins are considered brothers. They don't call them cousins. They call them their brothers. They're all family. They're kin, K-I-N. They're kin. And so the whole idea is that Jesus didn't have younger brothers, because he would be the first, and then the Protestants say that Mary had other kids. There are several reasons in the Bible that we say that didn't happen, because number one, I'm only going to give you one good example. Is Jesus on the cross. He says to his mother, John is going to be your son, and John, this is now your mother. Why did he do that? Because Mary didn't have any other sons, because in Jewish culture, in the culture of the Middle East at that time, the son number two would then take care of mom. If son number one dies, son number two now becomes the quote unquote office of the firstborn. If he dies, son number 3 becomes the office of the firstborn, and he takes over the legislative and authority of the father and takes care of the mother. That's the way it is. But Mary didn't have any other sons, so Jesus said, Mom, I'm appointing my disciple John to take care of you. And it says from that point on, Mary moved into his house and lived with him, not with one of her other quote unquote sons. Now, there's a document called the Proto-Evangelium of James that said Joseph was an older man and had other children from a previous marriage, and the whole Eastern Church believes that.
Thank you very much, Prentice, for the call. You can hear the music right back with more Steve Ray on Catholic Answers Live. Why do Catholics pray to dead people, bow to statues, venerate relics, and where do we find any of this stuff in the Bible? In the delightful book, The Saints Pray for You, Dr. Carla Broussard convincingly defends the ancient Christian belief rooted in Scripture that the saints care for us, that they're our allies. Order your copy of The Saints Pray for You today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, of morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Join me for Beacon of Truth today at 4 p.m. Eastern.
It's a Word of God Wednesday on the next Beacon of Truth, talking about the second Sunday of Lent.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Our guest is Steve Ray. Steve Ray has spent a large portion of his life in the Holy Land, leading pilgrimages in the Holy Land, in many other places as well. The footsteps of his Footsteps series, where he did the whole, really, every major step in salvation history, he physically went there, whether it was Iraq or Egypt or Jordan or Israel, wherever. And so this is his area of expertise. If you'd like to find out more about what he does, please go to CatholicConvert.com, CatholicConvert.com. Yep. If you've got questions about the Holy Family, you're welcome to call with them. Steve, I'm going to get another phone question, and then I do want to get back to working our way through the day of the Holy Family. But let's start with Carrie in Waco, Texas, listening on Red Sea Catholic Radio. Carrie, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Steve.
Yes, Mr. Ray.
Yes, sir.
Talking to you. I'm a veterinarian, and we were taught like a lot of public health in school. Now, I'm older, 66, but that public health stayed with me, and the Jewish people were pretty clean people. And when you were talking about, like, on the Chosen, they don't have any teeth, blah, blah, blah. These Jewish people, first of all, had all those, 610 laws. They clean themselves. They use toothpicks to clean their teeth. As a veterinarian, when I go to the sale barn on a day and look at these ranchers that still have all their teeth, and the only thing they have in their mouth is a toothpick, and they don't brush their teeth, and they got a chaw of tobacco in the back. These Jewish folks were pretty clean folks.
All right,
And that's the only thing I was saying, that hey, the Chosen does a pretty good job. I know a lot of Catholics kind of, which, yeah, they put some drama in there, ain't no doubt, but come on, when you compare it to, Moses and the parting of the Red Sea, they do a pretty good job of helping you understand what the Jewish culture was like back in the day.
All right, Carrie, defending the Apostles' Teeth and the Chosen TV show. Steve Ray?
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't say that the Chosen doesn't portray well the apostles and Jesus. I was making a point that in many ways they are. It's a modern version of what they look like. And I'm not saying that the Jews are dirty people. I've never said that. What I said is that they don't have dentists and they didn't have showers. They did not have what we do. Of course, the Jewish people were clean. The high priest had to bathe 7 times before he went into the temple. They had mikvahs where they had to cleanse themselves before they went into the holy places and for their sacred times. But I'm not saying that they were dirty people. What I was saying is that they don't have showers, they don't have dentists, they don't have the kind of things we do now. I went out fishing all night with 2 Jewish fishermen on the Sea of Galilee, and then we pulled into the mouth of the Jordan River, and after they ate, everybody picked twigs off the bushes that the boats are tied to, and they cleaned their teeth with the twigs. And I tell people when I'm out there, I explained to them, Jesus and the guys, they would have used those little twigs. They didn't have toothpicks like we do, but they would have picked a little branch off and picked their teeth. But I'll tell you, I've been out in the desert where the Bedouins are. This is where Abraham and Isaac and Jacob were with their sheep out in the fields, out in the hillside along the Dead Sea in the Judean wilderness. And I've been out there many times with those Bedouins, and they are just like the Abraham and Isaac and the patriarchs, and they don't have all their teeth. And this is not a society like us. Even in Europe, there's a saying that people in Europe go shopping every day and they shower once a week. We in America shower every day and we go shopping every week. Cultures are different. Now, I never said that Jewish people were dirty. What I said is that they didn't live like us and have all the modern amenities like dentists and toothbrushes and things like we do.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Appreciate the call. The number here is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. If you've got questions about the Holy Family, we'd love it if you would call. Let me just ask you this. One thing that I know you have pointed out before, but just to get to Joseph, because I'm partial to Joseph. I'd like to know more about him. What Steve Ray is the only adjective used to describe St. Joseph?
There's a lot of words that you can use to describe him, but there's only one adjective used, and that's the word righteous. He was a just man or a righteous man. And it doesn't mean that he was a good old boy. It didn't mean that. The word righteous there is in his application to the law. And it's even said because at that point, he was going to set Mary aside because she was found to be with child. And because of the law about a woman getting pregnant out of wedlock, and now people are going to say it, there's 2 steps to marriage, and she was betrothed, but they had not moved in yet. There's 2 steps to marriage over there. And she had been betrothed, but he had not taken her into his home. And she was found to be with child, and Joseph was going to, some translations say, divorce her or set her aside according to the law of Moses. And that's where it said, because he was a righteous man, he was going to do this. That means that he was dedicated and he was very particular about obedience to the law of God. That's the only adjective we have. However, we can obviously say he was hardworking. He was faithful, he was trustworthy, he was obedient, he was also hesitant. And people say, what do you mean hesitant? Well, because that very situation with Mary, he was hesitant. He was betrothed to her. He was going to marry her. But now this happened, and he was hesitant. He hesitated. And the angel came and said, Joseph, it's okay. You can marry this woman because that which is in her is of the Holy Spirit. And then he obeyed. Being hesitant, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that if we hesitate so that we can take time to make sure we're doing the right thing. And so that's the one adjective about Joseph, is that he was a righteous man, but we also know that he had to be a very wonderful man, because God chose Joseph to raise his own son. So just think of it. Jesus is the son of God. God is his father. But God gives Joseph, he relinquishes some of his prerogatives as father and gives them to Joseph. What kind of a man would Joseph have to be for God to say, I'm going to give you some of my prerogatives as father to raise my son? So
Steve, thank you. I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out who I'm going to next. A little change was made here on my notes, but the beauty of Saint Joseph as a person is not something that was always emphasized in the church. It doesn't seem to me like if you go to like the medieval church, you get the same reverence for Joseph that we have now.
I think it's waned over time, and in the recent years, it has become much more, where we've acknowledged feast days for him, patron saint of the church, of the universal church. And yes, he's become much more, but this is kind of the way it is. The church develops and grows and appreciates things more and more as time goes on. And Joseph is one of those things. The emphasis in the first centuries was not on Mary. The emphasis was, who is Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
Is he God or is he man? Is he some kind of oil and water mixed together, God and man? What is he? So first 5 centuries were all arguing over who Jesus was and what the Trinity was. Then Mary came in because she helped define who Jesus was. When you say she's the mother of God, that says 2 things. It says first, she's his mother, so he's physical. She's the mother of God, therefore he's divine. So then Mary became, and then other saints became more important. And Joseph, the church, she's a great mother. She teaches us things as we need to know them.
Well, let's go to Joseph then, who has a question about Joseph. Joseph in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. We're glad you're here. Joseph, go ahead with your question for Steve Ray.
I love your show. I listen to it all the time.
Well, thank you, Joseph.
I have great devotion to St. Joseph. Do they know where he is buried?
There is, to my understanding, nothing about his death or his burial. We only know that he's the patron saint of the happy death because he died somewhere between Jesus's 12th year of age and 30 years of age, because he's there when Jesus is in. They find him in the temple at 12 years old, but he never is mentioned again later on during Jesus's ministry. It's always Mary and not Mary and Joseph. So the assumption is he died somewhere in that period, and it was a happy death because we assumed he died in the arms of Mary and Jesus. But there's no, to my knowledge, there's no place where and no church claims his burial. I'm going to read to you a quote from St. Francis de Sales, who is a very reputable saint. And he says this: how could we doubt that our Lord raised glorious Joseph up into heaven, body and soul? For he had the honor and grace of carrying Jesus so often in his blessed arms in which our Lord took so much pleasure. Saint Joseph is therefore in heaven, body and soul, without a doubt.
What do you think about that? Had you thought about that, Joseph?
I believe that.
You know, that's actually...
I believe that.
I was just reading the other day, that's actually something Pope John the 23rd also endorsed.
Yes, he did. I got it right here. He said the same thing. He says... he says the same. I won't read the whole quote, but yes, he does. It's very astute of you, Sai, to know that. On the solemnity, he asserted Saint Joseph was assumed into body in heaven in a homily he gave in 1960 on the Ascension. It was on the Ascension of Christ. He said that Joseph was also taken up into heaven, which would explain why there's nobody that claims his bones.
Joseph, a wonderful question. Thank you. We got to take a break. We'll come back. We're going to continue a day in the life of the Holy Family with Steve Ray on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
One of the biggest mistakes a Christian can make is to try to do good without God's help. St. Therese said, when we trust only ourselves and not God, our soul becomes incapable of virtue. Her remedy? Works of charity. And the greatest work of charity is to share the gospel. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we encourage you to share the gospel with someone who doesn't know Jesus. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Mother Angelica had a simple goal when she began EWTN: to reach the world with the gospel message. EWTN Radio broadcasts 24/7 on smart speakers, a worldwide shortwave radio service, and radio services for the Philippines, Great Britain, and Ireland. We've never wavered from our mandate to proclaim the truth and majesty of the Catholic faith. Thank you for joining EWTN in this mission.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. It's not very often. Jimmy says it happens to him all the time, but it doesn't always happen to me, where I'm reading something and then it comes up on the show. But I just happened to be reading the other day about Pope St. John the 23rd and his homily, that he thought that Joseph had been assumed, like Mary, bodily into heaven. But it's a speculation, of course, but one that you are certainly welcome to have. Let me ask you another Joseph question then, though. And I think you got to this a little bit before, but I want to ask you straight out. Old man or young man when he marries Mary?
This is a big debate, and people want to view him as young. The Western Church basically views him as a young man. The Eastern Church and the early Church viewed him as an older man. The reason being, and I know some popular books are saying, I've seen several of them talk about Joseph being, how could he have gone into Egypt and back if he was 100 years old? Well, first of all, I never say that he was 100 years old, but to say that that it would be impossible for Joseph to go back and forth, he was 100 years old. Don't forget that Moses came out of Egypt and led the children of Israel all the way through the desert. And when he died, he was 120 years old. And he said his strength had not abated nor his eyes dimmed. Caleb was 80 years old, and Caleb says, give me the mountains in Hebron. I'll take the giants out. And he went in and defeated the giants at 80 years old. Joseph was still leading the people in Egypt at 110. So, that whole argument doesn't hold water with me. But the fact is, there's a document. The Bible doesn't tell us how old Joseph was. The document called the Proto-Evangelium of James was written in the 2nd century, was very reputable among early Christians. From that document, we get the names Joachim and Anna, the names of Mary and the parents of Mary. We get the presentation of Mary. We have that as a devotion in the church. That comes from this document. Anyway, my point is this document was very reputable in the early church and is becoming more reputable again now. And it says that Joseph was an older man chosen by God to care for this young girl who probably was an orphan because her parents were older and died before she grew up, because that's also in this document. And so Joseph would have been a husband and almost like a caretaker bringing him in. The story says that he had been married previously. He had 4 sons and 2 daughters, and that would have been the brothers and sisters of our Lord, but they would have been stepbrothers in that case. The whole early church believed in that, and the whole Eastern church still does. And most of the artwork you see of Joseph, he's an older man. And so this is a whole other debate. I know there's people who will disagree with me vehemently about that. That's okay. They can. I'm not saying the church hasn't defined whether Joseph was younger or older. It has never defined that, and you can believe either way. I think that the weight of the whole argument goes towards an older man. I'm not saying ancient. I'm not saying ancient. I'm saying an older man.
But not, right. And that would seem to be the oldest evidence that we have. But like you said, you're free to believe, to think of Joseph however you. There's no settled on it, but it does seem that the earliest documents would suggest an older man.
It's much more romantic to see him as a 19-year-old boy and Mary as a 15, 16-year-old. But it's not defined by the church.
All right, so I also want to ask you this about the Holy Family, because I know you know about this, but if you read Matthew's Gospel, there's basically 2 stories of Jesus's nativity or his infancy. the very beginning of Jesus' life. Matthew tells one of them, Luke tells one of them. They don't tell it the same. They clearly are emphasizing very different things. So bring it all together for me. What actually happened?
Well, Matthew is convincing, he's writing to the Jewish people to convince them that Jesus is their king and their Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
Luke is writing to a much wider audience and is portraying Jesus as being divine. And so you see that very clearly in his. The four Gospels, I don't have time to go through and kind of lay out what happened when and where. Jimmy Akin's really good at that kind of stuff. But I would just say that four Gospels are four different perspectives. It's like there's an accident on Main Street and Maple, and somebody witnesses it from being in the car, and they tell their story. Then another guy sees it from the sidewalk. Another guy sees it from the 17th story of the Hilton Hotel. And they all tell the story, what they saw. They see at different angles, but they're not contradicting each other. So the whole story is that Mary and Joseph came to Bethlehem. They gave birth to the baby. The shepherds were there. They came. Somewhere along the line, they moved out of the cave because it said that the wise men came to the house where they were. So they obviously weren't in the stable kind of thing. They came to the house, which the Franciscans say is the Milk Grotto, which is a 10-minute walk away from the nativity site. And there's a milk grotto there that they say that's the house where they lived. The wise men came. They told Herod what happened. Somewhere in there was 40 days. They went to presentation of Jesus. Herod was killing the babies. They had to flee to Egypt. They came back from Egypt and went back up home to Nazareth. How all of it, what day and month that all happened, I don't know, but that's the story, and they don't contradict each other.
Steve Ray is our guest. We're talking about the Holy Family. As a matter of fact, what's a day in the life of the Holy Family life like? And in studio with us, you're going to have to tell me your name. Kailash. Okay. Thank you very much for coming in. Sometimes we got folks in the studio with us, and he's like, I got a follow-up question. He needed to have this follow-up question. So since we're scared of people in the studio, we said, okay, come in, sit down, and you can ask your question. We're not really scared of you, Kailash. Welcome. Where'd you come from?
From Denver.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Oh, getting away from the snow. Little Southern California sunshine.
Not too much snow, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, we're glad you're here. So what did you want to follow up on with Steve Ray?
It was a follow-up, I think, for a subject matter touched before about the Assumption of St. Joseph. And my question was, what's the history of that belief, and what is the earliest attestation of that? It's something I've heard about, but I don't know much.
I don't think it would be early. I wouldn't guess. Steve, there's nothing in the early church about Joseph.
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. And when I gave my talk on Joseph, I didn't research that real deeply. I only researched the fact that nobody has able to say where he's buried. There's no definitive site of a burial site for him. And that's very significant because all the saints, you know where they're buried. Peter is buried under St. Peter's, and all churches have relics of things. And I always say to people, where are the relics of Mary? Where are the relics of Joseph? Well, they're not in anybody's altar. And from what I understand in my simple studies, and I haven't done a deep study of it, is that nobody knows any place that claims to be the burial site of Joseph or have relics of him. And Francis de Sales, I think he's kind of speculating here. Of course, if he held Jesus in his arms, of course. So when you got Francis de Sales and John the 23rd, both saints and pretty good guys, they say it. So I tend to agree with them, but I don't have any proof of it.
What do you think, Kailash?
It's kind of the same idea for the Blessed Virgin, that he was given such a special grace given the role he had with our Lord. And it's believable, I suppose. And the idea is there is no tomb that we know of.
No, there most certainly is not. And that is odd because, the family of Jesus would have known where Joseph was buried. But I'm sure you're aware, it's not the same as what we believe about the Assumption of Mary.
Of course.
In the sense that one of them is a dogma of the church.
Sure.
And the other one is a complete theological speculation.
Of course, yeah.
A guess, more or less. Yeah.
Right. And I think, though, it's also interesting, like you said, that we know where St. Peter's body is, or where St. Paul's relics are.
Right. Yeah.
All the saints, all the apostles, all the early Christians that were well known, we know where they're buried.
and lots of other people from the ancient world. But no, I mean, if you have Jesus and you have an entire family that knows where Joseph was buried and not a word about it. Again, it's like Steve said, probably the best word for it is theological speculation, but there it is. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming to visit us.
Yes.
It's nice to have visitors in the building. Let me ask you this, if I may, Steve. We're kind of on St. Joseph and Jesus. We're talking about the life of the Holy Family. Let's talk about little Jesus. You know, what would the father-son relationship be like in those days? I mean, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Tell me.
Well, the rabbis taught, and you read it in the Mishnah, which is a collection of the Jewish traditions during the first centuries. They said that if you don't teach a son a trade, you teach him to be a thief, like we already mentioned. So Joseph would have been responsible to teach him a trade. It was also the father's responsibility. He was the ultimate educator of the child. He didn't hand it off to the priests and the Pharisees or to the local public school or to the CCD teacher. The father was the teacher of his son, and not only by example, but by teaching him. And he also, the fathers had said that the rabbi said you had to teach them the scriptures at 5 years old, and the tradition of the elders and of the Jewish people by 10 years old. And by the age of 13, they were now under the law themselves. Age 13, right? 12, 13. Bar mitzvah is what we have today among the Jews. And so they viewed it as you teach the children the scripture starting at 5, then you teach them the traditions. And at 13, they have to now be under the authority of God themselves. Bar mitzvah means son of the law. The one now who's under the law. The easy way to say it is the boy up until that age could say, I go to synagogue because mommy and daddy make me go to synagogue. But at that age, he's now responsible to God himself. He is now responsible to be accountable to God himself, and he now needs to say, I'm ready to die for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because I'm an adult Jew, and I go now to synagogue because I serve God myself as an adult male. So this is something Joseph had to teach him.
So if Joseph is working with tools, I don't know if he was working in. You said it was probably stone. And that makes sense because there's not a lot of wood there. I don't think I've never been there.
Everything there is.
It's all made of stone. Somehow I lost Steve's sound. What did you guys do something to take seats?
Yeah, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
I can hear you again. Everything made their stone today in Nazareth and Jerusalem. By the way, in Jerusalem, by law, you have to build with Jerusalem limestone because it gives a beautiful uniform. If you're up and looking out over Jerusalem, it's all this kind of a pinky beige color uniform made of Jerusalem limestone. It's quarried up in Nazareth too, and everything is built of stone. So you just assume that's what they built. They built cities with stone roads and stone walls and stone theaters.
So Jesus probably, in a society that has these kind of physical skills and the use of tools, a child of 10 or 11 or 12 can actually be quite competent in the use. Like he's probably a pretty adequate stone cutter by the time he's 10 or 11.
Yes, because he wants to do what dad does. Every boy wants his dad to be proud of him. He wants to be able to do. My grandson, James, he came over here and he wanted to do the snow blowing. And he was so determined to do it. I thought he was just going to go out for a few minutes and get cold. He pushed that thing for over an hour. He was not going to quit until it was done because he wanted his grandpa proud of him. And I taught him how to use it, and he was proud to do it. Boys want to make their dads proud of them. They want to serve. They want to do it right. And if a dad takes their son under their wing because, come with me, son, I'm going to teach you how to do this, and I'll be proud of you for doing it. This is why there's so many problems in our country today, because sons don't have dads.
Oh, amen. Preach it. Preach it. But the great thing about Jesus working in stone means some of the stones he cut are still out there. I don't know which ones they are. If it was wood, we'd say, well, it might not be there anymore. But
also, what did he do? He said, I will build my church. Of course he'll build it. He's a builder.
Steve Ray has been our guest. Check him out at CatholicConvert.com. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome. Thank you, Si.
All right, coming right back. Braden Cook is our guest next hour on Catholic Answers Live.